Okay, so essentially back on the whole Kafanchan thing, yeah? Okay, cool. So like a rough draft of the story is a girl and a guy, they are paragliding. The story starts with let me just start. I think I'll just use Barbali, right? So the story starts with like a couple trying to escape from North Korea to cross from North Korea to South Korea, right? And how they didn't make it. And how they didn't make it, the couple didn't make it, but their child was able to make it. Their child being D. No, their child being D's mom, right? I've forgotten her name, right? And then she ended up like getting married to, and then she grew up, went to college, and then she got married to this guy that was from Brazil. And then they ended up having like a child called D, right? And the story kind of runs through how our mom's traumatic past, affected like the upbringing of Lee, if you will. So essentially, and then D kind of felt abandoned. I'm forgetting the story myself. I don't even... Okay. So essentially, right? Lee was adopted by. Okay, cool. Let me start again. Lee was adopted by. She has foster parents that adopted her, right? And then she grew up with these foster parents. And then when she was like 18, our real parents came back, which was like her mom and then her dad. They came back to come and like pick her, and our parents are like our biological parents are very rich, right? So they kind of like muscles their way through the whole legal system, and they got her back from like her foster parents essentially, and she did not like that idea, right? So she was forced to go back to like reunite with like her biological parents, and half sisters essentially. No, our sisters, right? She has two sisters because our biological parents had sisters, right? And then the reason why our mom behaved like that was because our mom herself was like, our mom's parents were like from North Korea, and then they tried to cross into South Korea, and then they died in the process. No, they didn't die, but they had to give up essentially. They made a huge sacrifice for her. So she also grew up in a foster home. So that's why her mom was like, the trauma was like genetic essentially. She passed down the trauma to her. So that's like a rough background sketch of Lee, right? And then the family decides to go, but in a way to like reunite, like to please Lee. Lee's not very happy with her biological parents, right? So they always try to get on our good side, right? So in a way to like unite her, right? To like make her happy, right? They decide to like go on a vacation, right? A vacation in Brazil, which is like our biological dad's home country, right? And then they go to Brazil. But but she obviously would not want to go to Brazil with them because she hates like her biological parents. So they kind of like sweeten the deal by convincing foster parents, which is the parents that adopted her, to like to join them on the like trip, if you will. Right. So once she hears that, okay, her foster parents are going to be coming with them on the trip, she kind of agrees to go, right? She would not have gone by herself, but she kind of agrees to go. So her birthday is on the 31st of December, which is like New Year's Day, right? No, that's not New Year. Christmas. 24th of December, which is like the day before Christmas. Okay, so they get to Brazil. Okay, cool. And then the other part of the story is that Lee's foster parents, right? I think his name is Jones, right? His foster dad, his name is Jones. He has like a paragliding school, right? Where he teaches people how to paraglide, and bungee jumping. He does all these things, right? So he has like a school. So one of his best students in the school, I think his name is Jones. I've forgotten the name of the characters. I'm sorry. I think his name is Jones. Let's call him Jones. After Lee was like forcefully taken away from them, right, by our biological parents, right, Lee's biological father, let's call him Sam, right? Lee's biological father, Sam, became is because their only foster child was like their adopted child was taken away from them. He kind of like was depressed, and then he kind of like filled that gap with like Jones. Jones is like the best student in his like diving school, in his like bungee jumping school, right? It's like he's like the best student he has there, so they kind of became very close, right? So when the opportunity came for Lee, when Lee's dad foster parents were told that like they were going to Brazil, right? He decided to bring Jones along with him. Do you understand? So the trip now is so the people going on the trip now is Lee's mom. She has a name. I've forgotten her name. Kanji. Okay, Lee's mom's name. Her name is Kanji. So Lee's mom. Her name is Kanji. Lee's dad, biological dad. His name is Alejandro. Okay, so Lee's mom Kanji. Lee's biological mom Kanji. Lee's biological dad Alejandro, and she has two stepsisters, and then Lee herself, right? Plus Lee's stepfather, who we are calling Sam, and then Lee's foster dad, who we are calling Sam, and then Lee's foster mom, we'll just call her Betty or something, right? And then Jones, right? So that's like how many people now? 3 on this side. 3 on this side. 5 on this side. So 8 people are going to the Amazon. They are going to Brazil for the vacation because of me, essentially. So they go to Brazil. Again, why Brazil? Because Alejandro is from Brazil. He's half Brazilian, half American, right? So they go to Brazil. And it's very rich too. So they go to Brazil, and then they have dinner, and then at the dinner table, Lee has a therapist too, right? She brings her therapist with her because she knows that family drama, everything. So she brings her therapist with her, yeah, to the family vacation. So there are 9 people on vacation, right? Okay, cool. At the vacation, right? So the therapist is there, and then at the dinner table during Lee's birthday, this is like Christmas Eve, right? Lee starts to Alejandro, like Lee's biological father, like seizes the moment to kind of explain to Lee that he never wanted to give her up for adoption, and that her mom too did not really want to give her up for adoption, but they were very young at the time and they had their own demons. He just came forward and like kind of like he explained everything to her, right? And I think Lee kind of like she saw sense in what he said. She kind of understood what he said, right? So they started crying, and then they had like this whole nice family reunion. But she needed to clear her head, right? So she told her dad that her biological father and her foster dad that she wanted to clear her head. So she wanted to go bungee jump. She wanted to like go paragliding, right? And they were like, nah, why would she want to? That she's not in the right state of mind to go paragliding by herself. So she insisted she had to go paragliding. So they were like, okay. So they didn't want to like jinx the whole situation. They didn't want to make her feel bad. They are just reunited as a family. This is what they have been praying for. So in order to not to make her feel bad, right? They said that she will not be allowed to go on she will not be allowed to paraglide by herself, right? She had to go with someone. So they assigned Jones, which is, again, Jones is the best student in Sam, which is Lee's foster dad's like bungee jumping school, right? It's like the best students there, right? So they were like, okay, if Lee wants to go paragliding, she can go paragliding. But she has to go with Jones, right? They weren't allowed to paraglide alone by herself. So they took them like 2 days to get to where they, the spot for the paragliding. And so they did all the preparation, and then they went paragliding, right? And then as they were paragliding, yeah, as Jones and Lee were paragliding, yeah, a wind, like a very strong wind came, almost like a tornado, and then knocked them. It just snatched them, essentially. And then when he woke up, and then the story fast forwards to where Lee wakes up, and then she wakes up to the sound of like crackling fire. Fire is just crackling, like a crackling bonfire. And then she opens her eyes, and then she sees in the distance, she sees like a bonfire, and then she sees Jones sitting around the bonfire. And then Jones knows, and then she tries to get up, and then she notices that she feels like a little pain on her side. And then Jones comes over to her and then tells her that they they ran into a wind, and then the wind essentially, like, they crash landed essentially, and that they are in the Amazon essentially now, and that our parachute was like badly torn up. So they are using our parachute. So it basically took our parachute and made a tent out of it. But his own parachute, right? He in the morning he's going to climb the trees, yeah, because they're in the Amazon, right? There are these very tall trees there, so he's going to climb the trees and then spread his own parachute on top of the tree, so that if like a rescue helicopter flies by, they can just see them essentially. It's like a very like an SOS sign essentially, if you will. So that was like, so he told Lee that was the plan. So Lee was like, she was kind of like taken aback by the whole thing, but she was like, plan makes sense. So Jones kind of invited her to eat, because it was like, she noticed that on the bonfire there was like mushrooms, right? And then so Jones was like, would she like some mushrooms? And then she was like, no, that she doesn't want any mushrooms. And Jones was like, okay, she doesn't want any mushrooms. That the mushrooms are actually very nice. But so Lee was like asking Jones, like, okay, is he like an expert with, like, he knows that he's very good with paragliding, right? He knows that he's very good with bungee jumping, but she doesn't think he has any experience with like mushrooms, right? And then he was like, nah, that bullshit, that he knows what he's doing. That if she wants some mushrooms, he can like make some for her. She was like, no, she's not having the mushrooms. That she'll just wait for the morning, right? So the morning, so she went back to to the she went to inside like the makeshift shift tent that was beside the fire, right? It wasn't very far. It was very close to the fire. And then Jones proceeded to like take the mushrooms. So he took the mushrooms and he ate it. And he kind of like fell asleep. So she just thought that, nothing happened, right? So she too, she started dozing, and then she started dozing off, and then she heard like 30 minutes after Jones, like an hour after like Jones had eaten the mushrooms, the fire was still the bonfire was starting to like go out. Jones came to sleep inside the tent with her, so the two of them were laying inside the tent, and then she had Jones like cough once, right, out of his sleep. And then she didn't say anything. And then another 2 minutes went by, and then he coughed again. And another 30 seconds went by, and then he coughed again. And then this time she was like, okay. She was like, bless you, She just like kind of like said bless you to him. And he was like, And then he didn't respond, and he just kept coughing. And this time the cough became like repetitive, if you will. And then all of a sudden she stood up, right? He stood up, right? And then when he stood up, she thought that, he stood up for maybe to get water or something, right? But nope, he stood up, and then he just started walking. He walked out of the tent, right? So she thought maybe he wanted to like get something from the fire. So she didn't like bother to follow him. And then all of a sudden she saw him walking past the fire. And then he just walked straight into the jungle, right? And then at that point she had to like follow him. So she grabbed like one of the burning woods, yeah. She used it as like a torch, and then she grabbed it and followed him. And then she noticed that at first he was walking very slowly, and then after some time he picked up pace, and then he just literally just started running. So she started running after him, and she was shouting, Jones, 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 in the middle of the night. She had like a torch in her hand. She was screaming Jones at the top of her voice, and she was running after him. And he was just coughing through the jungle. But she noticed that it was almost as if, like, it wasn't just running aimlessly into the Amazon forest. No, because we run like 2 steps and then make a left, take like 3 steps and then make a right. Like, it was almost as if he had like a map in his head that he was following, right? And it was like navigating this Amazon jungle. So it was doing that. It was navigating this Amazon jungle. So it was doing that. And then eventually, And then eventually, she noticed that, and then it got to a point it was really running very fast, and she could not like catch up with him because it was at this point it was running very fast, and she was tired. But luckily for her, she noticed that as he was running, he was like coughing off like it was like this weird green stuff that was mixed with blood. It was coughing blood and this green stuff, right? Um, so she decided to use that to like trail to as a trail marker for it to like to trace him, right? So she stopped running and then she decided to like follow the goo essentially um of the reddish green stuff, right? That Jones was vomiting, right? That he left behind as a trail. So she followed it and she followed it and then she followed it. She followed it about 2 hours, right? Now she was following it. The sun, it was no longer night. It was like morning. It was getting to the very wee hours of the morning, and the sun was about to come up. So she was very happy because the thought she had on her was like starting to like burn out. So the wood was about to like burn out essentially. The makeshift torch that she had with her, the wood was about to burn out. So she was very happy with that. So she kept following the trail of the goo through the jungle, and then eventually the goo led her to like this a place where there was like almost as if the Amazon jungle had ended, right? And then it was just this endless sea of white sand, right? Of just white, um, um, endless sea of sand essentially. But it wasn't white sand. It wasn't like normal white beach sand. It was like a different type of sand. It was like purple sand, It was just like, and she had never seen purple sand in her life before. So she was like, huh, this is weird, right? But she thought maybe there was like because it was like, it was this endless sea of sand. So she just thought, okay, definitely, this can't be a desert. Maybe this is like, there's a water body here somewhere. There's a large water body here somewhere. So maybe that was where Jones was going to. Maybe he was going to the water body. So she looks in the sand and then she still saw like that green good thing, right? So she just started following it, and then started following it, and then she started following it, and then 1 hour passed, and then another one passed, and then before she could say what was happening, she had been trekking for 6 hours. So at this point, she was very tired, and this good thing just really didn't seem to stop. Right? It just kept going and going and going. So just about when she was about to give up, right? She saw Jones, right? And she looked up about like 100 meters away. She saw somebody sitting down, and it was like a silhouette. So it's a silhouette of like Jones, right? He was sitting down. So she just managed to like drag herself to where it was, and then lo and behold, he wasn't hurt or anything. He was just sitting down very calmly. And this time he had vomited a lot, right? He had vomited like there was a lot of that green bloodish goo, a lot of it on the floor where he was sitting. And there was like this very small, it wasn't like a lake, it was like an oasis. Like it was just like 12 feet away from where he was sitting, right? So so when he saw her, right, he didn't even say anything. He just sat down like that. So she was very exhausted, right? So she just sat down there to him, and they were like speechless. Both of them were like speechless. For like they didn't say anything to each other for like, I don't know, 25 minutes. And eventually she mustered like the strength to ask him what the whole thing was about. Why did he just wake up in the middle of the night and just start running? And now, she had like 1,000,001 questions. Where were they? She had never seen purple sand in her life. Now there's this desert stroke beach that has purple sand. And then, what is Jones? This is like an elaborate plan, She doesn't understand. She just wanted to go she just went paragliding, and the next thing they are crash landed. Jones was telling her it was like a wind that caused them to crash land, and she has no memory of any wind. She just had like 1,001 questions to ask Jones, but she wanted to just started by asking him if it was all right, and then he was like, yeah, it's fine. And then she was like, okay, so why did he? Then the second most important question was like, why did he now run through the like Amazon forest? Like she doesn't what was up with that? And then it was like, oh, that. that apparently that the mushroom that he swallowed was like, what was it, cordyceps or something like that. It's like a mushroom. It's a special type of mushroom, like a zombie mushroom essentially. And then the mushroom needs like the mushroom can only reproduce in a certain water, yeah, a certain water, and then a certain lake essentially, a certain pond, a certain water body. But the water body has why? Because the water body has like a certain algae inside of it that the mushroom needs to reproduce. So essentially, the way the mushrooms propagate is that um, when a when some like an animal or a plant, an animal or a person eats the mushroom, right? The mushroom kind of like takes over the 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 neurons of the person essentially, and then it essentially leads the person to that lake. It uses that person as a vehicle, that animal or that person as a vehicle to where that lake is. It would direct you to where that lake is, and then you would vomit it, and then it will enter that lake, and then it will, because enter that water body essentially, and because the algae is in water body, then the mushroom can continue with its reproductive cycle essentially. So that's essentially what had happened to Jones, right? He ate the mushroom. The mushroom took over his like neuron system, took over his body, and then essentially drove him through the Amazon jungle, navigated him carefully through the Amazon jungle, and carefully brought him to that water body, which happened to be the oasis that was 6 feet away from them. And then he vomited the mushroom inside the water, and then essentially immediately did that, he was basically fine, right? So Lee was like, okay, cool story, bro. Are you okay? Are you sure you're okay? He was like, yeah. I think I think he thinks that's the theory. That's the theory he has in his head, because that's what he thinks happened, right? So she was like, is he okay? And then it was like, yeah, of course he's okay. That is she okay? And then she was like, yeah, she thinks that she's okay. So she was like, okay, they should like try to like get back to the camp now. And Jones was like, yeah, good like idea. They should go back, right? And so the plan they had was that they would just like trace that goo back, because there was a trail, right? So they'll just trace the trail, take the trail back, right? And then he got up, right? And they started they started tracing the trail back, and they were heading back for the Amazon jungle. And then it got to a point, they discovered that the trail had disappeared completely. It had been buried in sand, because apparently the purple sand used to like just like bounce around, right? So wind had carried the purple sand and it buried some of the trail. So they were kind of like stuck in that sand, because they had checked for like an hour at that point. So they were like, what do we do now? Do we just keep trying to, because they didn't know which direction to head to, because it was just like, to their left it was just like this sea of sand, purple sand. To their right it was this, to the north, to the south, to the east, to the west. It was just like a sea of purple sand essentially. They didn't know where to go. So to cut the long story short, essentially, I don't want to, I'll have like dialogue and everything here. They decided to like stay for like a day or two, like pass the night in, because it was getting late, right? So they decided to pass the night in that desert, essentially, that desert of purple sand, right? Which that purple sanded desert, they decided to pass the night there. And then their plan was like in the morning they would find their way back to the Amazon, right? So they sat down once again, and then as they were sitting down, they saw like there were some like weird looking gazelles. It was like between a mix between an antelope and a gazelle, right? It was kind of like a mix between an antelope, a gazelle, and like a zebra. It was just like this very weird like animal, right? Yeah. And then those animals came to that oasis to drink water, right? It was like a herd of them, right? So immediately they came, they were drinking water there. Jones like got up, ran, And then the animals kind of scattered, but it was able to like catch one of them, and then it caught one of them, and then it kind of killed it essentially and brought it back and then skinned it. Um, and the animal was very big, so they skinned it and then they used this hide as like as a tent, like a makeshift tent. Um, it wasn't the best tent in the world, but they used this hide as a makeshift tent. And then they used the rest of the body for meat, right? So they ate the meat the next day, and then the next day they attempted to like they attempted to like so they left their makeshift tent and their makeshift like the remnants of the meat, and then they were like this was the next day they were like, okay, you know what, we'll just like try to find our way out of here. So they attempted to like find their way out of there, but they trekked for like another 6-7 hours, and then in the end they discovered that they just ended up where they started. They ended up where their tent was again. So it dawned on them that they were just moving around in circles, right? So they were very frustrated, so they decided to just sit at the tent. But this time, as they were sitting at the tent, those animals came again. But this time, the animals did not come alone. They came with like there was now like a shepherd with them, or someone that looked like a shepherd. And then um, um, when the guy saw them, right? So Lee was very excited to see like a fellow human being essentially, because it meant that all hope wasn't lost, because she was already losing hope, right? And she was already regretting even like because she knew her family would be worried, people would be looking for her, yada yada yada. She was already losing hope, right? So when she saw this other guy coming, she was very very happy. Jones, on the other hand, wasn't very elated, so they went to meet the guys actually, and then she was very happy. She saw the guy, she hugged him immediately. And then, Jones was actually not very happy. He was like very skeptical about the whole thing. So the man was like, he was actually looking. I noticed that one of his animals got missing, and that do they have any idea where the animal was? And then Lee was like, yes, that she does. That he killed the animal. That Jones killed the animal the other day and the night before, and they basically ate it. And she just told him like the whole nine. And then she proceeded to tell him how like they were paragliding and how they got lost in the Amazon jungle and how she know the whole story. And then so the man introduced himself as Sergio, right? His name was Sergio. So essentially the man just gave them the whole gist that his name is, this is where we do like a little bit of exposition, right? So the man tells her that they are no longer in the Amazon forest, that they are in somewhere called Kafanchan. And then Kafanchan is like the desert of the purple sand. And then Kafanchan is the home of like, essentially that whatever she was taught in school about geography of the world was like very wrong. And that it wasn't wrong, but it wasn't the full story. And then the full story is that the earth actually has like, is held up by pillars, that they're actually real pillars holding up the earth. And that those pillars there are 7 continents on the planet. And then like every continent has like minus Europe, has like a pillar, a physical pillar like holding up the sky. And then but Kafanchan, what makes the Kafanchan and those pillars, the parts of the world where those pillars are like they have like their own unique biome, and those biomes are called Kafanchan. So there's a Kafanchan in every continent in the world essentially. So there's a Kafanchan in the Americas, which is the one in the Amazon. There's a Kafanchan in Africa, which is in the Congo, in the half of the Congo, right? The Congo jungle. There's a Kafanchan in Asia, right? Which is in the Himalayas, right? In the Gobi Desert. No, it's in the Gobi Desert. There's a Kafanchan in the Himalaya, in Asia, which is in Gobi Desert. There's like I said, there's a Kafanchan everywhere. But you cannot like but the Kafanchan, you can't see the Kafanchan. Most earthly people cannot see the Kafanchan because and people are unaware of the presence of those Kafanchans, because the Kafanchan is also home to like a special type of mushroom. They are called baobab mushrooms, right? And then those baobab mushrooms, right, they produce this hallucinogenic essentially, right? And those baobab mushrooms are tall. They are like 200 feet tall, and they are very, very tall. And Kafanchan has like all those Kafanchan on every continent. They have like hundreds of them, and these mushrooms are tall. They are giant. Some of them are 200, 300 feet tall, right? And then because those mushrooms are very tall, right, they release like spores. Like it's almost as if they're like, you know how mold releases spores, right? This one's too, they release spores into the hair, right? But like the effect of those spores on like but those spores are kind of like psychedelic in nature. You know, mushrooms they have like psychedelic properties, right? So these ones too, they have this very psychedelic thing to them where, but the psychedelic they produce is like it mixes with the air, right? And then normal human beings like they inhale it, and then essentially it marks even though those scavengers are in plain sight, right? People don't see it because like where our oxygen is under the influence of that, like it has been polluted because has been polluted essentially. The oxygen we breathe is polluted, and those like baobab mushrooms have been pumping that like hallucinogenic into our atmospheres for like billions of years, millions of years, right? Since the earth has existed. So our oxygen is polluted, right? So when human beings breathe in that oxygen, right? We don't know that we are hallucinating, but we're hallucinating, right? So but the hallucination does not affect our reasoning. The only thing it affects is like we cannot see the Kafanchan essentially, even though it's in plain sight. It's in front of you. Even if you went there, you would not be able to see it. So that's why nobody has been able to see it. Even people that fly, pilots, they fly over it every time, and they just never see that part of the world because those mushrooms have, like I said, those baobab mushrooms, they've been pumping this hallucinogenic into our atmosphere, and it's already one with our atmosphere, and it prevents people from seeing it, right? That was essentially the basic and the reason why the mushrooms are doing that is because like it's kind of like it's kind of like a protection for them because they do it because they don't want it was like kind of like a protection for them. You know how animals like camouflage, like chameleons, they have like this camouflage where they blend in with the environment so that their predators cannot spot them. So it's something like that for the mushrooms too. It's how they evolved. They evolved into like some animals underwater like the squid, they would like squirt out this like dark ink to like blur the vision of the to opaque or how do you say it, to like block the vision of their predator to not see the predator, right? So the mushrooms are kind of like that too, but they evolved differently. They evolved with this hallucinogenic, and the hallucinogenic kind of like it fucks with the mind of like their predators, man included. So again, for the nth time, when we breathe in that oxygen, that polluted oxygen that we don't know is polluted, we can't see them. We can't see the Kafanchan, but it doesn't mean it's not there. We just can't see it. So nobody ever goes there. We just think it's the Amazon. When we view it, we just see it like a jungle, right? So that's why we see the Amazon jungle, right? But it's not 100% jungle. It's like about 30% jungle, 70% Kafanchan. But the normal human eye is just Amazon jungle. Same thing in the Gobi Desert. It's like 70%. It's not any desert or anything. It's 70% Kafanchan, 30% desert. But to the normal human eye, it's just 70% desert, right? And then we just explore like 30% of it and go back and be like, we've seen it. We've explored like a little bit of the Amazon and be like, we've seen it's just a jungle, So we just give up. And it's like that with all the Kafanchans on the continent, right? But what makes the Kafanchans important is that they house like I said, they house the pillars that hold the sky, essentially. That's what makes them important. But the Kafanchan that Jones and what's his name? Jones and Lee are on, right? The Kafanchan that they are currently in is out of all these 6 Kafanchans, right? Is the special Kafanchan because, like I said, Europe doesn't have a Kafanchan, right? So the Americas has 2 Kafanchans. It has so it means Europe, there's no pillar in Europe essentially. So instead of having a pillar in Europe, is in the Americas, right? So the Americas have two pillars, right? Two sky pillars essentially, holding like the sky, holding the sky up essentially. Every continent has one, but the Americas have two. So yeah, Kafanchan is very very special. And then there's a uh, so Sergio essentially was like, so just give them like the like I said, exposition, like the little low back, the little gist on how the whole Kafanchan is. So like Lee was like, she didn't believe that at first, but as they were talking, they were walking. So they had walked around. I'll say they had walked about 30 kilometers, right? They were following Sergio, and then at that point they had seen like this skyline of like, how you see like the New York skyline or something like that, but this time it wasn't like the skyline of it. It looked like the skyline of a city, but it was the skyline of like baobab mushrooms, right? It was very beautiful. So they saw this skyline of baobab mushrooms, afar off, right? So she, at that point, she believed him because she would see the baobab mushrooms afar off, right? Um, so so she asked Sergio. But all this while, by the way, Jones was quiet. He was just very quiet. He was just like following them. So she asked Sergio that, okay, so how did he get here? Is he from the Kafanchan, yada yada yada? And he was like, no, there's actually from Italy. They came from Italy. And then so she was like, how did he find here? And then he was like, he's like an intern in. Oh, he has like a, okay. So this is the point where I don't. My mind is like in two places, right? So his backstory. So Sergio's backstory, right? The way I want to do it is I want to make his backstory. I want him to be. Okay, so let me just continue the story. I'll just go with this one. So you'd be like, he's from Italy, and he, as a young child, right? His parents wanted him to be like a priest. Like his mom was raped essentially on the streets of like Torino. Let's put it like that. His mom was raped on the street of Torino. So his mom had to like his mom was so his mom's parents essentially rejected the pregnancy essentially. So his mom was forced to like fend for herself. So she went to meet some nuns essentially, and then those nuns took her in, and then they delivered the baby, and then the baby was Sergio, right? So Sergio kind of like grew up in like, and then our mom went on to be a nun herself, right? She could not like, so she just technically just became a nun too. So he kind of like grew up in monastery, right, with a lot of monks, and a lot of like priests and a lot of nuns around him, right? So as he grew up, like he took a liking to like ancient texts and reading religious texts, right? It just came naturally to him because he grew up inside a monastery, right? So as a young child, they would ask him. His job was like to clean, was just to keep the church clean, right? So one day while he was he was cleaning their. It was when he was 9 years old. One day while he was cleaning the church, right? There's this giant wall in the church that had like a giant mosaic of Mother Mary holding Jesus, right? So the monks had already the head of the high priest there, the priest there, always told him to not like, he could clean everywhere in church, but that part of the church of the sanctuary was very very holy, right? That he did because the picture of Mary and holding Jesus was there. It was very very sacred, so he wasn't even allowed. He just told him to never go to clean there, right? So he too just like obeyed because he never went there. All the nuns in the monastery, they never went to that part of the monastery, right? That sacred room that had like the picture of Mary there, just empty room, right? She just never went there. So when he was 9 years old, one day his curiosity took like the better of him, so he went inside the room, and it was like just like, it looked like this very empty room, right? And then he entered the room. He walked around the room. The room was around 600 square feet. He walked around it. It was just this very spherical room. He walked around it. It was empty. It was just like just very nice mosaic windows, right? Nice mosaic window pane, right? So he walked around it, and then boy was about to leave. So he was like, huh. So he entered, but he didn't. So he entered. So he walked around it, right? So he was so fascinated with the art that he was like, you know what? Let me just run. As a child, it was like, let me run my fingers through. He was running his fingers through like the mosaic windows, right? And when he and then he the way I put it, like, it was like he ran his finger through the mosaic windows, right? And then on the forehead of Jesus, right? He touched like the forehead of Jesus, right? And then, but instead of like it being a window pane, right? It felt the texture was different, right? So he sank his finger into it, and then apparently it was like a button. So immediately he did that, right? The floor that he was standing on just started like it was like an elevator, so it just started like going down. So he was very, very scared, right? He tried to like stop it. He tried to like quickly like get up, but it was very fast. The elevator was very fast. So the floor essentially just like he started like collapsing inside, descending inside. And then before I could say Jack Robinson, he was like 200 feet below ground, below the ground, and he looked up. He saw the room, and then in front of him was just these stairs that just led into like a tunnel. So he went inside. He tried to go back up, right? But there were no buttons, right? There were no buttons to go back up, and it was like 200 feet up, so he couldn't climb it. It wasn't that he could climb it, right? So it was just like, you know what? I was just going to follow the tunnel, right? So he entered inside the tunnel, and then he just kept going and just kept going, just kept going. And but the weird thing was that the tunnel was like well lit. There was like it was properly lit, and it was very clean. So people had been using it, right? Um, so in the tunnel, we discovered like the tunnel terminated into like a library, right? And then the library too also had like another tunnel inside of it, and then um, um, I discovered that the library, when he entered the library, he saw the same painting of Maria and Jesus, right? Mary and Jesus, right? So he put his hand on Mary, he saw the same painting inside that kind of room, a replica of that room, essentially, beside the library in the tunnel, right? So he entered and he put his hand on Mary, right? And then he brought him up, right? But this time, it didn't bring him up when he brought him up, right? He didn't bring him up in their chapel, right? He brought him up there was a chapel that was nested in the Vatican, essentially. So apparently that tunnel linked to the tunnel in their monastery. Their monastery was linked to the Vatican by like a tunnel, essentially, right? And then there was a library beneath the Vatican. So immediately he got back to the surface, right? He just quickly dashed out and ran out. He discovered that he was in the Vatican, so he ran. The Vatican was around, I'll say like, 400 feet away from their own monastery, right? So he ran back home, essentially. So he discovered that as a child when he was 9 years old. So that thing kind of traumatized him for a few months. But again, his curiosity, like 2 months after, his curiosity got the best of him. And then he went back, clicked the button again. And then he would sneak into the library and read like some of the books inside him. I said he had like this affinity for ancient texts. So it was in those ancient texts that he read about like Kafanchan, essentially, the Kafanchans, essentially. So he discovered it at the age of 13. So he had been like, so apparently it was something, the Vatican essentially was very aware of the Kafanchans, and it was like a very well guarded secret. It just didn't tell anybody. So Sergio actually discovered this thing at the age of 13. And so since that time he discovered it, he has been like preparing to like come, right? So by the time he was like 19 years old, he just like, he had done all the preparations. He had gotten the map and everything. So he just basically went there by himself. So he did not get lost. He went there by himself. Now, for you to be able to find the Kafanchan, he had to like starve himself. So the antidote of the how do you say it? um essentially the antidote of the mush of the hallucinogenic that the mushrooms are producing is like a certain recipe of like pasta. Do you understand? You know they're in Italy now, so I just want to tie it to like pasta, right? And I watched this very cool documentary about the history of pasta the other day. So I think it was the day before yesterday. So I just want to tie inside. So it'd be like a certain type of pasta, right? So Sergio started like preparing that pasta. And he ate it back to back for like a year, right? So that pasta, because he had ingested that pasta for like a year, right? He could see the Kafanchans, he could see, the hallucinogenic could not like in the atmosphere could not in the oxygen we were breathing did not have any effect on him. So he just had to take a plane to the Amazon, and then when he landed, he could basically see from the airport. He could see the Kafanchan, so he just basically just trekked there. Do you understand? But the thing he had to do was he had to for his vision to be able to pick stuff like that, he had to eat like that pasta continuously for like a year, right? So that's how we put it. So Lee was like, "Wow, cool story, bro." Um, so the way we're going to do it is that I kind of like sped the story up. So Lee and Jones, right? They had been in that Amazon forest for it wasn't like the next day. It was like a whole week, or let's make it like 2 weeks, right? And Lee had been she had on their first day. I mentioned how like Jones like killed like and like this weird looking antelope, right? Ish. Um, so she essentially she just started like falling in love with Jones because only the two of them were like in the Kafanchan. Essentially, only the two of them were stuck in the desert. So she had grown fond of him essentially, and she was starting to like him, and Jones too was like, and Jones essentially loved it. Essentially, he loved the idea of them being stuck in the desert because little backstory for Jones, he came from like a very wealthy home. Um, um, and all his life, and his dad was very fuck up. He essentially was in the shadow of his dad. Classic rich kid problem, right? It was like in the shadow of his dad. So he had always had a point to prove, essentially, if you will, right? But he never had the chance to prove it because everything was done for him, basically, which is essentially what drove him to like things like skydiving and bungee jumping, right? Because he just wanted to prove to himself that he could do stuff without his parents. Do you understand? Without his dad, without being in the shadow of his dad, literally, right? So that was what drove him to like skydiving and bungee jumping, which is how he ended up in the school of Sam, which was like the foster father of like Lee. Yeah. Okay. Cool. So essentially, he enjoyed it because it meant that that desert a place meant that he could prove himself at least to Lee, right? He could finally be useful to somebody, right? So he was useful to Lee, and he didn't have he was actually praying that they will never find their way out of the desert because he just enjoyed the fact that it was useful to somebody, and he was like, and he didn't want to go back to the world, to the normal world, because the world just it had nothing to offer him essentially, because back in the real world, he was in the shadow of his dad essentially, and he could not prove himself, and he did not see a way out. He was always going to be in the fuck off. He was always going to be in the shadow of his dad ish. Just classic rich kid problem, right? So when he saw Sergio come, so they had stayed there for like 2 weeks. They had stayed in the desert for 2 weeks. And then it was after 2 weeks that Sergio arrived, right? So when he saw Sergio arriving, right, Sergio was like bad news to him, essentially. So he didn't like Sergio at all. I need that light. He didn't like Sergio at all, essentially. So Sergio essentially gave them like the run. Oh Jesus! Sergio gave them like I said, he gave them like the whole gist, like, oh, this is Kafanchan, yada yada yada. So by that time, like I said, they had walked like 200. They were like very close to like the Kafanchan. They had seen this skyline of like, they had seen the skyline of like Bawaj mushrooms, right? So Jones spoke up essentially, and he was like, you know what, like the two of them should go on into the Kafanchan, and he was just going to stay in the desert, like Purple Sand Desert, that they can go on into progress. That he doesn't want to leave this place. And then Lee was like, why does he want to leave this place? And he was like, he doesn't want to leave this place. Like, he just wants to stay here. That it's of them. They will just go back to their tents, right? If they need him, they can always come back and get him. And then Lee was like, why would you not want to, like, come with us? But it was like, he's not moving an inch. So Lee was like, okay, good riddance to bad rubbish, right? She was going to come back. She was going to go to Kafanchan and get food supplies and bring it back for him like the next day. So that was the plan, right? So what's his name now? Jones went back into the desert, and then Sergio and Lee proceeded into like the proper Kafanchan, right? And then when they entered the Kafanchan, they discovered that Lee saw all these very exotic animals, right? So apparently, all the animals we think that are extinct in this world, right? They are not extinct anything. They are actually like do you know how in the lockdown people had like quarantine, right? To prevent people from like getting diseases, right? Okay, cool. So the United Nations and the Vatican, right? They have this like in this book, right? They have this special program where it's like a special program where when you see like an animal is under the threat of human beings, right? Maybe the animal is going to get extinct, right? Or human beings are starting to hunt the animal, right? They take the animal and then they take the animal to Kafanchan. Do you understand? So Kafanchan is like essentially it's like this very exotic zoo, if you will. So imagine every animal that you think is extinct. They are not actually extinct. All of them are in Kafanchan, and there are a lot of animals that we are not even aware of that are in the Kafanchan, right? So I think on Instagram, so there are a lot of animals. So the whole story, yeah. This is all the reasons why I've been very skeptical about making this story, because these are like the things in my head, right? I want to like bring them out. You know, I told you that I did ask God that you know, every creator has this like when you're making stuff, right? There are some stuff you want to make that it makes it to the drawing board, but it doesn't make the cut essentially, right? Like director's cut, if you will, right? So there's stuff that, so I'm pretty sure I asked God that, you know, there's probably stuff like if God created everything, made heaven, he made earth, right? And we have all these very nice animals, like, okay, the cats make the cut, lion made the cut, hyena made the cut, dogs made the cut, eagles make the cut, falcons make the cut, sharks make the cut, right? There must have been some animals that God must have conceptualized, but they just didn't, they were on the drawing board, but they just didn't quite make the cut. Do you understand? So I think I prayed that prayer while I was in Nigeria. So I started having all these like all these like weird looking animals inside my head. Yeah, so I want to like kind of bring all of those stuff out. I think when I was in Nigeria, I actually put like one of them on Instagram, like a butterfly finned. I call it a butterfly finned tuna or something, which is like it's like a fish. No, was it tuna? I forgot what I called it. Okay, essentially it's like a fish, right? In the water. So inside that Kafanchan, right, there's a lake called Lake okay, there's a lake called Lake Zaza. Let's just call it Lake Zaza for a lack of a better name. There's a lake called Lake Zaza, right? And then inside that Lake Zaza, right, there's this like butterfly finned I forgot what I called it. Was it tuna? It was essentially, it's like eel, electric. Okay, cool. So it's like, imagine like an eel, right? But not like a normal eel. Like this one has like butterfly, like has like fins, like, but the fins are like butterfly, like they are like pattern like that of like a butterfly. So it's like a crossbreed between a butterfly and an eel, right? So it's like this butterfly fin eel. So there are all these like weird crossbreed animals inside the place. Like it's a very exotic place, right? So essentially, Lee when she entered the Kafanchan proper, right, the proper Kafanchan, right, she was like lost for words. It was like, what the fuck is this? This is like heaven. She saw all the animals that she thought was extinct. Woolly mammoths, um, Tasmanian devils, like just like in any animal you can think of that they told you that is extinct is a lie. It's not extinct. All of them are in that Kafanchan. How did they get there? Anytime the UN feels like the animal is getting like threatened, they will like pack all the animals and just go and dump them in Kafanchan. So Kafanchan is like a Noah's Ark. Think of Kafanchan as Noah's Ark, but on steroids, something like that. So this is why she saw all these animals there. It's like paradise, a little bit of paradise, if you will. And then, and then there were people there too. She was surprised to see people. And then she asked Sergio who are all these people were. And then he told her that they are like they again the history we were taught in school is not complete, essentially. That they are the Incas. We were taught that like the Incas just vanished, all these like the Mayas and Incas, they had like this calendar that they had this doomsday calendar, right? That everybody thought was in real life, right? They had this doomsday calendar that people took that and thought that by the world was going to come to an end in 1999, right? And then the world didn't come to an end in 1999, so everybody just assumed that the world was going to come to an end in 2012, right? But the calendar was actually being misread, essentially. The calendar was not about the end of the world, right? It was a prophecy about the end of their own civilization, right? So essentially, it was like split into two, right? So the Mayan, their empire was like split into two camps, right? There was one camp that was like, you know what? When that prophecy was conceived, that prophecy of like an apocalypse that was going to end their civilization, when that prophecy was revealed to them, right? They are split into two camps, right? The first camp was like, one camp was like they will stay back and protect their what they had built, essentially. And then the other camp was like they were just going to run, essentially, because they believe that you can't stop prophecy, but you can avoid it. So there's a camp that thought they could outrun the prophecy, and then there was another camp that thought that they'll stay back and fight, right? So apparently the prophecy was not even referring to the end of the world. It was just referring to the invasion of the Spanish Inquisition. It was just referencing the invasion of the Spaniards that were going to come, and all the deadly diseases they were going to bring that was going to wipe out the population of the native population, essentially, right? So the people that stayed back, right, the Mayans that stayed back, they essentially got decimated. But that was like half of them. The other half of them, they did not stay back. They decided, they packed their bags and they ran, right? They ran about like 3 years even before the Spanish came, right? So they left their civilization behind and they started wandering around. And then, the Mayans, they are very big into like ayahuasca, all these like psychedelics. So they took all these psychedelics, and then eventually one of them found their high priest. It was like the Moses that led them out of there. They had their own version of Moses, essentially. He was the one that found Kafanchan. You know how Moses found the promised land, right? Okay, cool. Their own high priest found Kafanchan. So they have been in Kafanchan since that time, right? So they continued their own Mayan vibe thing there. So when you enter Kafanchan, right, there's all these super advanced Mayan architecture, right? But because like they've been away from like civilization, from like they've been isolated from the rest of humanity, right? They've been able to like grow a lot technologically, yada yada yada. So it's like this very advanced type 2 civilization, right? That they have this very advanced technology and they're like 400 years ahead of everybody. And then and the United Nations is aware of it. And I don't know, maybe I'll use United Nations. I'll just give it another name. Like the body that was governing that world is aware of it, essentially. And a lot of the technology that we're using now is like old tech essentially. It's like 400 years ago tech, kind of thing. Like something like, just imagining something like generative AI is like, I don't know, 400 years ago tech that he had like some 400 years ago. Just like, eh. And they're just like releasing his state, like, it's like a release, like, I don't know how to explain it in English. It's like a staggered release that, okay, you can have this. This thing is never going to be useful to us, you can have it. Stuff like that. Essentially, it's a very advanced civilization. Let's leave it like at that. So it's like a very advanced civilization in Kafanchan. Um, and the civilization is so advanced that they don't eat. They eat, right? But eating food is now like a ceremony. It's just like a ceremonial thing. So the only time they eat is on Christmas. They eat on Christmas. And then for a whole year they don't eat anything because their civilization is so advanced now that the food they eat on Christmas, they've figured out a way of like, the food is so nourishing, and I don't know how to explain it. It's so nourishing that they don't have to eat again until the next Christmas, and their metabolism is so slow that they age, but they age like at 1/10 the speed that we do age, right? So instead of people, so um the average lifespan they have is like 700 years. Our own is like 770, so the average is like 700 years there, right? So it's almost as if they don't die. They die, they age, but it's like it takes 700 years for them to age because they're aging at 1/10 our speed. Do you understand? Because they don't eat. They eat only once in a year. Stuff like that. Really cool stuff like that. So essentially, very advanced civilization. Um, um, yeah. So they take Leah around essentially. I want to like this thing's probably like 2 hours now, so I'll have to like round up. So they take Leah around. Lee sees like the Kafanchan. She sees all this, like she sees the pillar, all those like those earth pillars that are holding the sky, which is like they're made of crystals. Diamonds have like the strongest, like it's like forces essentially. It's like a real pillar, but it's really, really nice. It's like a tornado essentially. It's like a tornado, but it's like a fixed tornado. But inside the tornado, right, they're like like this. It's very beautiful essentially. A pillar that will hold the sky up, like it's very beautiful. So it's like a giant tornado, like very, very big tornado, like very huge, right? But it's not like route, but it's also like it's like liquid in a way, because and when you look inside of it, it's sparkly, shiny, because there are a lot of like carbon diamonds are like the strongest things on materials on Earth, right? So essentially, it's made up of there's this strange magnetic force inside it, and there's a lot of diamonds inside of it, right? So it's like it's very beautiful. It's like this tornado of like diamonds, and it's just sparkling, and it's just like it's beautiful. It's really nice. So they showed her like those like pillars, and she was like wowed by it, and and those people are so advanced, right? They are so in the future, right? So and then they offer her essentially. So the roundup is like they offer for her to like stay with them, right, in their Kafanchan, and she doesn't have. So she stayed there for a while, and she was very enamored by it, right? And then she mentioned that she wanted to go back to give what's it called? What's his name? She give Jones food, because Jones is stuck in the desert, right? And then she mentioned that she also wanted to see like her parents, that they are looking for her, right? And then they were like, she should not worry that her parents are. So the chief of the Kafanchan essentially. Okay, cool. So there are two ways this story could go, right? I could just I could make it like very romantic, lovey-dovey type shit where how in like most movies, like there's the protagonist is like the man, and then he has to save the women, right? Okay, this one's like a reverse of that. So like the protagonist here is like a woman, right, and she has to save the guys, right? So the guys that need to be saved are Sergio and Jones, right? So Jones has like he has like a scarcity mentality essentially. He wants to prove himself, and the only place he feels he can prove himself in the whole world is like a desert, right? So he has like a scarcity mentality. What's her name? Lee can help him with his scarcity mentality, right? And literally take him out of the desert, right? So that's one way. And then the other guy that needs to be saved is Sergio, right? Sergio doesn't have a scarcity mentality, but he does not. He's like most guys, right? He does not live in the moment. His head is always in the future. Like he's always like, what is next? What is next? Which is why he left his Vatican home, right? Left his mom behind. His mom that made so much sacrifices for him. And he came to like Kafanchan essentially to live with these people that he basically has nothing in common with them. But because those people are living in the future, he's there with them. And those people too, the reason why they left their own Mayan empire was because, again, because of a prophecy. So they have this habit of living in the future. They don't live in the present. They don't enjoy the present. They are always about what is next, what is next, what is next. So they have this ever-ending circle of it's like a tomorrow never comes civilization, essentially. They're just so fixated about the future, that they are not even thinking about what is now. Do you understand? So Sergio feels very at home there because he's plagued by not living in the present, right? So Lee is supposed to help him with that, help him see the light. Do you understand? And then there's a part of Kafanchan where, okay, cool. So the plot twist on Kafanchan. Okay, so and then then in the end, right? So in the same Kafanchan, right? Lee finds she sees her parents essentially. She sees her mom. She sees her dad. She sees our foster parents. She sees everybody inside the Kafanchan, existing in Kafanchan, and they're living in this like magical world of butterflies, and there are so many different species of butterflies, and there are so many roses, and it's so very nice. It's everything she has ever wanted. It's almost like paradise, like heaven, essentially. And then she found like her parents there, and then she asked them what they are doing there, and they were like, oh, that they were looking for her, and then they told her, they gave her this cock and bull story of how they also magically like ended up in Kafanchan, right? So but she didn't quite believe it. Do you understand? Because 1 minute the priest of the Mayan civilization in Kafanchan was asking what she was doing, and then barely an hour after that she found her parents there, and then she found her sisters there, and then she found Jones. She found what's his name? She found everybody. She found like Kanji, her mom. She found Alejandro, her dad. She found her two siblings there. She found Betty and she found Sam, like her foster parents. She found all of them in Kafanchan, and she was like, how did you get there? Do you know how Eminem was like, was he in Toy Soldiers? It was like, his daughter was talking to him, said, how did you get to Sweden? I followed you, daddy. Okay, cool. So it was like, something like that. I was like, how did you guys get here? Right? So essentially, the plot twist of Kafanchan is that those like mushrooms, right? Those baobab mushrooms, right? They're also the hallucinogenic is a two-way thing, right? So it prevents people from like finding the Kafanchan essentially. So you won't see it if you're in the outside world, right? You won't see it. But if you are inside, you will not leave because it creates the illusion of what you want for you. Do you understand? So if it's like heaven essentially, but it's like a custom version of heaven, right? So it creates the illusion of what you want for you. So so what Lee wanted was to be united with her family. So again, her family was there. They just appeared there magically. Her dad was there. Her mom was there. Our siblings, our foster parents were there. Sisters that she did not get along with in real life, they were there, and all of a sudden all of them got along, right? So she could basically just stay there and live happily ever after. Do you understand? Right? Which is the draw of Kafanchan, right? So that's the plot twist on Kafanchan. It's like whatever you want. You know that Bryson Tyler song? Take her to Rodale, give her whatever she wants. So Kafanchan is like Rodale if you think about it. It's like whatever you want. You just give it to you. Inside your head like that. essentially, right, she has to like use like our willpower. The way I'm going to write the story is that she's going to figure out that her parents, from the story, she's going to discover that their story is not genuine, right? As their story is not like, it's not making sense. So she's going to figure out that, the whole thing is just like a fucking illusion, right? The Kafanchan, because they are tangible, right? You can touch them, you can feel them. It's not as if they are holograms, no. So there's this guy. Okay, pause, right? There's this guy called There's this interview that I watched, right? There's this guy, I forgot, it's not Terence McKenna, it's another guy I've forgotten. He talked about the holographic universe, right? I'd forgotten his name. So it's something like that. It's like Kafanchan is like a holographic universe, essentially, where you're constantly projecting, you're creating a universe for yourself. I don't want to delve into all this shit. Okay, cool. Let's just get back to the story. So that's like the core of the story, essentially. So Baobali has to, like, first of all, the greatest temptation. Okay, so right. Okay, cool. So Babali has to do three things now. Number one, she has to conquer herself, first of all, which is what she has always ever wanted, was for her to live in peace with her family. Happily ever after, essentially. And that's what Kafanchan has given her. But it's not a real family, it's just an illusion. Right? So she has to, like, first of all, conquer that. So she has to conquer herself. And the greatest enemy you have to conquer is yourself. So she has to conquer herself. And when she finishes conquering herself, she has to help Sergio and what's his name? And Jones. She has to help them conquer their own bondages too, because again, Sergio is constantly living in the future. Jones is constantly living in scarcity. So she has to help all of them and then help them escape Kafanchan. Right? And she would have to escape because the mushrooms don't take kindly to people leaving, right? They don't want you to leave. And then the Mayans that are there, so they don't want you to leave because they don't want you to know, anybody to know that they exist. They don't want their secret to leak, essentially. So they don't want anybody to know. So she'll have to she has to leave, essentially. She has to leave Kafanchan and convince Sergio and Jones to come with her. And then they'll have to go back to the real world, right? And then, but the overall of the story is that it's like another version of like the telling of like the temptations of Jesus. You know how Jesus had three temptations in the Bible, where Satan was like, if you are the Son of God, eat this, like, turn the stones to bread. And then Jesus was like, I'm not hungry. Jesus was like, I'm hungry, but man shall not eat by bread alone. And then Satan was like, okay, if you are the Son of God, I'll show you like all the empires of this world, just bow down to me. Just bow. Another USB in the safe. And Jesus was like, nah. I'm not going to do that. And then Satan was like, okay. If you are the Son of God, jump down from this thing, this mountain. They will not let you dash off. The angels of God will catch you, lest you dash your feet against a stone, The bone of the Messiah will never be broken. Just jump. And Jesus was like, get the fuck out, Satan. That's where peace Jesus up. Jesus was like, get the fuck out. Right? So something like that is a retelling of that thing, right? So in this case, the three temptations are like, Kafanchan is like the devil, essentially. Kafanchan is literally the devil. Those baobab mushrooms, they represent devil, right? So they give you what you want, essentially. So they gave Sergio what he wanted. They gave Sergio scarcity, which is like the first temptation that Jesus had. If you are the Son of God, turn these stones to bread. Hunger. Deserts represent like hunger, scarcity. So that's what the first temptation is with Jones, right? Scarcity. And the second temptation is if you are the Son of God, jump down. He showed him all the kingdoms. No, the second temptation is you are the Son of God, bow down, essentially. Bow down and worship him. Show him all the kingdoms of the world. So Sergio essentially is living in this kingdom, this very super advanced kingdom, right? That is very futuristic, right? And then, so that's the second temptation, right? And then the third temptation is you are the son of God, jump down, and lest you, the angels of God will catch you, lest you. Essentially, just we dare you essentially. So that's the third temptation but that's like the strongest one. That's Baobab's temptation. Do you understand? So she's like Jesus in that. She's like the protagonist. She's like Jesus in a way. So she has to like not only save herself but save the rest of humanity, which in this case is like Sergio and what's his name, Jones, and then she has to do that and then find their way back into the Amazon forest where she'll be discovered by a search party essentially, and then she'll discover that they had only been gone for 5 minutes essentially. So all that time they spent in Kafanchan was just like 5 minutes. It wasn't 5 minutes though, it was a long time, but like I said, we're under the influence of those like hallucinogenics from those like those baobab mushrooms, right? So the way we perceive time is very different, right? Yeah. So that's like the basic gist of the story. There's another version of the story in my head, but we'll just stick with this one. This one's like the... So the reason why I don't want to like just like I can just like record this thing and just like put it on YouTube and call it a day. But there are so many like exotic animals that I want to like drop, and I want to. So I made, which is what prompted me to start making this video GPT app that I was making. But I was interrupted with this podcast GPT app that I was going to do because I ran out of 11 lab credits, right? I was like, what can I do? I can't just be sitting down. So I was like, let me just make a podcast app. So I started making podcast GPT. Now this podcast GPT app now, grief finish. Do you understand? So if I had done the video GPT app, right? Let's say I finish the video GPT app, right? I'll just take my time, sit down, narrate the story, because the video GPT app I was making has like a function for you to like record an audio. So I'll narrate the audio, and then the AI will take the audio that I just narrated and then generate all the images. Do you understand? So I'll take my time and describe all those animals that got put in my head, all those exotic animals that got put in my head. I'll narrate them one by one, and then I'll generate this very nice video of like to the best of like the way I can. Do you understand? So it's very visual. It's be like a standard. So when I'm saying when I'm narrating the Kafanchan, because I want it to really be graphic and really nice, right? It will be really really nice. So maybe I'll try to finish. Today is like 19th, yeah. Tomorrow I'll try my fucking best tomorrow, so at least get this project like tied up, right? So tomorrow and next month I'll try my best to finish this podcast GPT. I'll rush it. I'm even getting tired. I'm not going to lie to you. Right? Okay, and then I shall know that by the time we are nearing Christmas, I'll have finished this video GPT. The video GPT app, I've technically finished it. I just ran out of 11 lab credits, essentially. So that one is like small thing. So the minute I finish it, right, maybe on Christmas or maybe Christmas Eve, I don't know, around that time, if the Lord wills, you have to always put if the Lord wills. If the Lord wills, then I'll settle down and do the podcast. I'll do this Kafanchan thing and narrate it, and then we'll have like a proper story. Then I'll put it on YouTube, and then okay, cool. And then it'll be very graphic. It'll have all the animals. So that when I'm describing all these things, it won't be as if I'm yapping, right? It will be visible. Do you understand? So that's Kafanchan in a nutshell. Or that's one ending. Do you understand? Okay, cool. The other ending is the more action Indiana Jones style ending where the Mayans they don't want you to leave. So once you're in. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. You're not taking it out of. You're not making it out of their life, right? So they turn against They decide to like want to sacrifice. They try to convince Baba Lee to stay. What's her name? Lee to stay, but she was like, no, she's not staying. She's going. So they were like, okay. So they were like, you know what? Do you know how Incas are famous for like sacrifices? Mayans and Incas, well, we are still doing our sacrifices. So they plan to sacrifice. They will just sacrifice her. They said they will sacrifice her, right? But it's not only her. They'll sacrifice her and her friends. So her, what's the name of this guy? Jones and Sergio, right? They bond with the three of them, and then they start like they wait for like an eclipse essentially. So when the eclipse is about to happen, they lead them to this like to the top of this volcano. But it's not like a normal volcano, right? On Earth, on normal Earth, we have like volcanoes, and in volcanoes they spit lava, right? But in Kafanchan, no, the volcanoes they don't spit lava. These volcanoes here they spit. It's like they are hot water volcanoes. Do you understand? So it's hot water that is inside it. Do you understand? So instead of like having like lava, right? It's just like very hot water that comes out of it, like super hot, like 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit, kind of hot. Yeah, it doesn't evaporate too. Like super hot water. Do you understand? It's almost like mercury. It's not like real water, but it's like very very hot liquid that just seeps out there. Do you understand? So they'll plan to sacrifice them there. Do you understand? So like Indiana Jones style shit essentially. I don't want to go into detail. That's like an alternate ending to it, but I don't want to go down that route because I think the world has had enough of like Indiana Jones type stuff, right? Right. So I think I'll go the route of this Jesus temptation thing. It's more subtle. If you don't get it, you don't get it. If you get it, you get it. Which is kind of like my style. So I like it. And I think it's God that gave it to me, so I'll just stick it to it. And it has Jesus inside of it, so it's like it checks all the boxes for me. So I think we're just going to run with this one. So that's like Kafanchan in a nutshell. And there's a lot of dialogue like I'm trying to like I've not imputed to because I want it to be very narrative. I want it to be very dialogue driven. I don't want it to just be ingbati driven. I want it to be dialogue driven. So maybe tomorrow, right? I'll give you another shot, right? Okay, maybe I should not wait for all this. Like, I'll just, fuck it. Maybe tomorrow, I'll just narrate it again. I'll just sit down and narrate it properly with the dialogue and everything, right? Tomorrow, I'll narrate it, right? And then I'll push it on YouTube, right? And then when I finish this podcast GPT, maybe I should not rush this podcast GPT. When I finish the podcast GPT, I'll do the video GPT. When I finish the video GPT, then I'll now take the story and then I'll now redo it that time. Where with all the, which will be like the properly fleshed version of it. And then I'll have like a video that I wanted. So it's visual. It's just for my own satisfaction so that I can sit and be like, okay, I was able to do justice to all these things God showed me. So that's it. So that's Kafanchan. Desert of the purple sand, home of the baobab mushrooms. Yeah, the end. Jesus Christ.